Okay, so now on to true bearings. Now, the way I personally like to think about it is, see the word true? That means there could only be one true king. That's the way I like to think about it. And the only one true king, in this case, is going to be the North King. Now, like with compass bearing, we had two kings, right? We had the north-south, and then we send the message away. So we find the angle that's going away from the South King or away from the North King. Now with true bearing, because there's only one true king, I can only send the message going away from north. So the South King is completely gone now. But there's only one particular way that I can send it, and that's going to be in a clockwise motion. So let's write that down. So we measure the angle going clockwise. So what that means is from north right there, we're going to be going clockwise up until there. Okay, now the second thing that we need to keep in mind is that if I'm starting off at north, we're going to label that as 0 degrees. And because we're moving in the clockwise direction, when I go from north all the way to east, I've just completed 90 degrees. When I go from north to south, I've completed 180 degrees. What about when I go from north all the way to west? Well, 90, 180, another 90, that makes it 270 degrees. Now, what about if I go from north all the way up until I hit north again? That's going to be 360 degrees. And keep in mind, obviously, that every single quadrant is made up of 90 degrees. Okay, so how do we write down the true bearing? The true bearing is written using 3 digits. So, for example, we can have a true bearing of 9 degrees. And don't forget to write that little t there. That little t just indicates that, hey, we're dealing with true bearings. So that's what I mean by 3 digits. So if I had a bearing of 9 degrees, the way we write it as a true bearing using 3 digits, remember, would be 009 degrees followed by t that just represents true bearings. We could also have something like 80 degrees true, so that means it's going 80 degrees away from north. We could also have something like 170 degrees true. We can also have 350 degrees true, and basically all the way up until 360 degrees. Okay, so now let's have a look at how to find the true bearing. So example number 1, find the true bearing from O of the point A. So in other words, I'm starting off at O and I'm going to the point A. Now, because this is true bearings, we have to start from north and we're going clockwise all the way up until I hit the point or the line of the point. So, for example, have a look at the first one. So, starting off at north, going all the way up until I hit the line, and we've got to see, well, what angle does that make? And we can see that that's 20 degrees right there. So now, how would we write down the true bearing of point A? That's going to be 020t. So this just means that it's 20 degrees true. Now on to part B, O to A again. And remember, I'm interested in the angle that's going from north, going clockwise. So all the way up until I hit the line. So all of that blue line that I just drew, that's the angle that I'm interested in. Now, if you notice, I don't have that. So now how do we work it out? What the question does give me is that little angle right there, and that's going to be 10 degrees. Now, if you guys remember, every single quadrant was made up of 90 degrees. Now, I want to get rid of that 10. So to find this angle here, it's going to be 90 minus 10 degrees, which is going to be 80 degrees right there. So writing down the true bearing of A, it's going to be 080, true. Okay, now on to the part C. Be careful with this one. Remember, we're going from north, going clockwise all the way up until I hit the line that I need. So let's go and do that. North all the way up until I hit the line. So all of that is the angle that I'm interested in. Now, if you notice, the angle that they did give us was this angle right there, the 60 degrees. Now, that's just part of the angle that I need. That's just part of the bearing I need. I also need to work out all of that part right there. And we know that since that's a whole quadrant, that's 90 degrees. So what's happening here is we're going 90 degrees and then I'm going a further 60 degrees right there. So 90 plus 60, the true bearing will equal to 150 degrees true. Okay, so on to example D. So again, starting from north, going all the way up until I hit the line. So the one that I'm interested in is that right there. So that's the angle that I need to work out. Now, what they have given me though is this part over here. Now let's think about this. The 35 was put there for a reason. Now my bearing is not just going to be 35 degrees. Remember, I needed all that blue line right there, the one that I drew in the beginning. So if you notice, that line that I drew, it went from north all the way to east, so that made 90 degrees. And then I had to go a further this much. That's how much extra that I had to go. Now, how would I work that out? Well, there's a few ways. I can just go 90 minus the 35, and that'll give me that extra angle there that I needed, which will equal to 55 degrees. Now remember, I need all of this angle over there. That's what I'm interested in. So therefore, that'll be 90 plus the 55 degrees, which would equal to 145 degrees true. Now, what's another way to do this question? Well, now, if you remember, from north all the way to south, that makes up 180 degrees, right? Now, the part that I'm trying to get rid of would be this 35 degrees right there. So then I can just say, hold on, 180, get rid of that 35 degrees, which will give me 145 degrees. Therefore, this all the way there will equal to 145. So as you can see, this is probably a better approach to the question as you get the answer much quicker and requires less work. So the bearing from O to A would be 145 degrees true. Now let's apply that same idea to the next question, part E. So I got to find the bearing of from O to A. So ultimately I need all of that right there, all of that angle there. Now what I do know is from north to south, all of this is 180 degrees. And then I'm just going a further, an extra 40 degrees. So that's going to be 180 plus 40, which will equal to 220 degrees. So now that's going to be my true bearing. So 220 degrees true. Okay, so part F. Again, I need the bearing from O to A. So ultimately, I need all of that angle right there. Now look at what the question has given me. They gave me this angle right there, which is 50. Now, if you remember, from north all the way to west, that's going to make up 270 degrees. So all of this right there, that's 270 degrees. Now the part that I don't need is the 50 degrees right there. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to say, hey, if from north to west was 270, I just need to get rid of the 50, and that's going to give me all of that angle right there, and that's what I need. So that's going to equal to 220 degrees. So the bearing would be 220 degrees true. So now finding the true bearing of A, now I need all of that angle right there. So if you notice, they gave us that 30 degrees over here. So what that means is from north all the way to west, like what we mentioned earlier, that's going to be 270 degrees. And I'm just going another extra 30 degrees right there. So in total, 270 plus 30, that's going to give us 300 degrees. So the bearing would be 300 degrees true. For example, H, the bearing of O to A, so I got to go all the way up until I hit the line A. But what they've given me is that 10 degrees right there. Now, there's a few ways to do this, but in my opinion, the best way to do this is, okay, so from north all the way to north again, remember how we said that was 360 degrees? And what I'm doing is, that 360 degrees, I'm getting rid of that 10 degrees right there. And once I do that, then now that's going to give me all of this angle right there, and that's what I need. So that's going to be 360, take away 10, which is 350 degrees. So the bearing would be 350 degrees true. So now on to the third most important thing, and that's the wording. Now, the first easy wording that you guys will come across will be from and to or of. So they go hand in hand. So from would always be your starting point, and whenever you see the words to or of, that's going to be your end point. And let me give you an example. The bearing from A to B is 70 degrees. So my starting point is going to be A. Now that I know that's my starting point, straight away draw up your compass. And I'm going to B. So B would be my end point. Now B could be over here, over here, over here, over here. It could be in any one of the 4 quadrants. Now how do I know exactly which one it is? Well, that's where the bearing is going to come in handy. And it says that the bearing is 70 degrees. So let's recap. From A to B, it's going to be 70 degrees. And we know 70 degrees lies in this quadrant over there. So therefore, B would be over there. And we can also say that the bearing of B, so the end point was B, from A, the starting point, is 0, 7, 0, true. Now, the second type of wording that you will see very common in a question would be due north or due south, due east or due west. Now, what that means is if a point is due north of something, that means it's directly above it. So, for example, if I said B is due north of A, so B is due north of A. So, in other words, if A was over here, B has to be due north of that, which means that B would actually be up top right there. Now, what would happen if you accidentally switched these two around? If you said A was up top and B was down below. Well, revise the question again. Ask it to yourself again. Does this make sense? If I had a look, so look at where A is right there. Now, in relation to A, where would B be? Which direction is it in? Is it in north direction, south direction, east or west? And as you can see, it's going to be in the south direction. So therefore, if I accidentally did this, I can say, hold on, but B is south of A. Therefore, you would have made a mistake. And that's what I really like about this. You can always go back and correct yourself. And I'm going to bring it back to all about the logical thinking that you guys need to start applying with these questions. What if the question said, point A is due east of B? So of B, A has to be in the easterly direction. So therefore, A has to be right there. So in other words, if I was to draw up my compass, it will be a direct line from B to A. Now, the fourth most important thing is, and this is very crucial to answering a worded problems, because the only way these questions could get really challenging or really hard is when they do it as worded problems. And the way to overcome it is, now that you know how to measure the angle, you know how to write the angle or the bearing, you know the words, the specific words like due south or from and to. The fourth important thing is to draw up a compass point everywhere. Whether you think you're going to need it or whether you think you're not going to need it, doesn't matter. Wherever you see a point or they've given you a point, draw up a compass. Now, obviously the question's not going to tell you to do that, but that's what you need to do to help you out with the harder questions, even with the easier questions. Which brings me to point number 5, and that's to always look out for alternate angles. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. So the question's not going to tell you that these angles are alternate. So your job is now to look for it and to find these angles, and they're going to help you so much when you're solving the questions. Now let me show you how it's going to look like. So onto a short example. The bearing of B from A is 50 degrees true. So analyze the wording again. The bearing of B, so that's my end point B, from A. So now A is going to be my starting point. So let's say I had A there. Remember, straight away, draw up a compass. And the bearing of B from A is going to be 50 degrees. Now 50 degrees would lie in that quadrant right there. So that's how the diagram would look like. Now, this is what I mean by look out for the alternate angles. So we now know that that's going to be 50 degrees right there. Now, if you guys remember from alternate angles, the only way alternate angles are possible is if I have parallel lines. So for example, let's assume that these two are parallel, and if I had a line going like that, the alternate angles would be this angle here and that angle right there, as well as this angle right there and that angle right there. And I think majority of you guys would have known these as like Z angles or N angles, whatever way you know it, you know it. So that's what I'm talking about. Look out for those types of angles. Now, if we go back to our compass, let's look and see if we can find some parallel angles. Now, if you notice, see that north compass right there? That's going to be exactly parallel to the south compass over there. So in other words, this line is parallel to that line. So what do you notice? They are parallel, which means that if I have a line going through them, we can now look out for our alternate angles. So if that was 50 degrees right here, that's going to be alternate to that angle right there. So therefore that one over there would also be 50 degrees. And we can just keep on analyzing this further, and you realize that these types of analysis will actually help you a lot with the questions. I know I keep saying it, but it's really true. Like, these types of things help you out so much when you're doing a worded problem. Now, if I was to keep analyzing, well, if this one over here was 50 degrees, what would this angle over here be? Well, this is going to be 90 minus 50, which would give me 40 degrees. So that's 40 degrees right there. Now, what if the question was to ask us, find the bearing from B to A? Now, initially, the first example that we did, it said the bearing of B from A. So that's what we had was 50 degrees. Now the question's reversing it, and it's saying find the bearing from B. So now B becomes my starting point all the way to A. So in other words, the angle that I'm interested in is all of that right there. Okay, so how would we do that? Well, we know from north to south, that's just going to be 180 degrees. And then we're going another further 50 degrees right there. So therefore the bearing, or I should say the true bearing from B to A would be 230 degrees true. And there you have it. So all these 5 points are very important when you're doing questions related to true bearings. Let's just quickly go over them. So measure the angle from north going clockwise. So always starting at north going clockwise. Number 2, always write it as 3 digits followed by the letter T after at the end. Then number 3, pay close attention to the wording. So from and then to. And also due north, due south, east and west. Number 4, at every single point that you have or the question gives you, draw up the compass. So draw up the 4 quadrants. Number 5, always try to look out and try to find those alternate angles. And the only way you can really do that is if you draw up a compass at every single point. So these are my 5 main go-to points every time I'm doing a true bearings question.